I am here today, as promised, as we've discussed earlier on today. Knox Mailhes from Integrity Title Solutions. Knox, how are we doing?
Doing very, very well, thank you. How are you?
I am fabulous, thank you. It's the way we roll at Gerard Realty Show and the Gerard Realty Group. And, of course, Mike Mudry from USA Mortgage is still with us. Mike, chime in. We're going to talk about something that the three of us have to deal with every day, and it's closing, it's HUD statements, it's government regulations. And there are some things coming down, Knox, that are changing the way that HUD statements are going to be prepared. So the CFPB, what is that? Do you know what the letters are?
Yeah, it's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
It's a government agency. It's a self-funded government agency. All of the money they receive goes directly into the Treasury. It's a federal agency. There's no oversight by Congress. There's no oversight by the executive branch. It's kind of it's a big and growing government agency, but they regulate and oversee everything that a consumer might do, from Mike's mortgages to credit cards to insurance. I mean, basically anything where a consumer is going to spend money through a contract of some sort. It's going to be regulated by the CFPB, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, created by Elizabeth Warren, by the way, when she was a Harvard professor. So why do our listeners who are thinking about buying or selling real estate care?
You know, at the end of the day, the most important aspect of the Dodd-Frank Act that formed the CFPB and the new regulations are more about the nature and compliance that we're all going to have to deal with, which is by very virtue of our process is going to affect the consumer. Many haven't bought or sold a home in a long time, so they're not going to remember what it should or shouldn't have been before. However, our lenders and your title companies now have to abide by things called best practices. We all have to be out in front of that by August 1.
August 1st of this year is when the rules will change.
Correct.
Who decides which practice is the best?
Well, they've issued a small document. It's about 1,099 pages that we all had to
Did
digest.
anybody read it?
I read all of it at least 3 times.
Is that one of those that we have to pass it before we have a chance to, in order to know what's in it? We have to pass it or something like that?
Yeah, I can pass it somewhere.
So I interrupted you. I mean, you were talking about just that this new document has been created and is going to be put in effect in August.
Correct. And it's costing everybody resources. It's going to tax, I think Mike can attest to, our resources a little bit. And it's not that it's good, bad, or indifferent. I think what the bottom line is, we are now going to be expected to very much educate the consumer, predicated by the what we used to call a HUD.
Right.
Now, is going to be a 3-page document that's a consumer disclosure form. And that form is going to basically reflect everything that abides by and goes into the purchasing of your home.
So the HUD, which is the document that a buyer and or a seller will get at closing, that basically does the accounting work, right? The debits and credits, pays off, the people who need to be paid off from the mortgage to
all the charges are on that HUD.
All the charges. So
credits,
it starts with what you're paying or what you sold the house for. And each of those sections, of which there's probably, I think, 350 lines on the HUD statement, and it's broken down into 10 or 12 sections. And what you're saying is there's now new rules for each of those sections and how those numbers are determined and how they get on that page. And there's more, there's more effort that has to go into to make sure that those are right beforehand, right?
Correct. It's not so much that there's more or less effort, although I suppose there will be for a while because we're not used to it. And
the learning curve.
The learning curve of even the individuals that administer those documents, it's going to take a little time. But luckily, like us and USA Mortgage, we've been very much out in front of that. We've worked with our underwriters.
Right.
We've implemented new websites, new software. I mean, we really have to completely compartmentalize our shops so that we can abide by that.
That whenever I hear about, increased government regulation, which results in increased compliance, in my brain that starts going ching ching.
Yeah.
We're talking increased money. Who's going to bear the cost of a higher level of compliance to protect our public from themselves? Really.
Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, Mike and I have both agreed we're going to pass it all to the realtors. So it should be fine there.
Well, there's no problem with that.
Great
So,
answer.
Damian Gerard Realty Show signing off.
No, but in all honesty, it's going to be diluted by way of all of us because it's just like you said, it's costing all of us more money.
Right.
It's going to cost us more money to train. It's going to cost us more money to audit. It's going to cost us more money to make sure that we're administering the proper documents in a way that the government agrees is the correct new way.
Right.
And that takes some time to get used to.
And what people don't realize, I think, especially when they get into a contract to buy or sell a house, there's, I don't know the exact numbers, something 32, 35 paragraphs of the standard St. Louis Association of Realtors contract, and many of those require a time by which some activity or action must be done. It can be the mortgage, to get the commitment letter for the mortgage, Knox survey issues,
closing
dates, inspections, municipal inspections. All of these things, traditionally have to get done by a certain period of time. And as I understand it, one of the complexities of the new regulation is that they all have to be done. Everything has to be done, 3 days, 5 days before the closing date?
Correct. It's 3 days. So you have to receive your documents, and they have to notably sign or somehow acknowledge that they have received those documents 3 days prior to closing. And
that's
that even
the new
goes back.
CFPB document that
Right.
Knox was referring to earlier. That's the new document they have to see and review 3 days prior to closing.
So a buyer or a seller has to have final numbers, has to have any survey issue, any title issue. If Uncle Joe comes back from Mexico and says he actually owns that house, 3 days before closing. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but we have things changed today, and we have for, years and years up to today. We've had changes the day of closing, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the one thing I will backpedal a little bit on this is that, if you do your final walkthrough very shortly prior to the closing,
right,
that if you're working with someone that is not what they call an affiliated business associate with you,
right.
In other words, they are not in some type of arrangement with you or your broker by way of a marketing services agreement or something like that, you will have a variance in there. You can have a 10% variance for things that are relative only to the home, the way we understand it, not the loan. The loan
10%, you mean of charges and costs, right?
Costs that are just
right.
relative to, hey, I needed the downspout fixed before I'm going to close.
So there is a bit of like I said, a variance in there if there's an issue that you discover. But for lending, for contract items,
no.
Yeah, from the mortgage side, once we've disclosed that information, it cannot change. We can't. You can't change your loan program. Nothing else can be changed relative to your APR.
Right.
None of those things can change. Otherwise, you have to redo it all, wait another 3 days.
So if something
or
gets
longer.
wacky
Yeah.
the day of or the day within 3 days, you just have to wait. I mean,
Right.
there's nothing that anybody can do.
And in theory, it's a good idea. If on every file, if people could get all their information and know their final figure 3 days ahead of time and ask any questions that they wanted to ask, that in theory would all be good.
Right.
It's just that, as we said, it's that learning curve and figuring out what it's going to require to do that.
I think I think next year we're going to look back and we're going to think that was not a really bad thing to do, but I think it's going to be a mess in August. September, the last half, or for 6 months after, it's going to be a mess. There's going to be a lot of closings that just plain get postponed.